recently Matt Walsh had a very strange segment on his show about white population, specifically the demographics of the country and the fact that white people as an overall percentage of the country continue to decline. This is due to a bunch of different factors. Partially it's immigration. Some of it is that a lot of the older white people and the baby boomer generation are dying off. There's a bunch of different factors, and this video is not about breaking down all the factors that have led to this happening. But what this video is about is how Matt Walsh talked about this topic, because I don't think it's bad to talk about it. If you want to talk about it, you can talk about it. But the way he talked about it was very strange, while also the whole time saying that you can't talk about it while actively talking about it. And this was called out specifically by PA Sitch. Let's read what he had to say about it before we watch this 3-minute segment. Matt Walsh trying to walk his audience towards ethno-nationalism and not a welcome sight. It's funny how he sets up the dichotomy in the beginning about you either having to celebrate diversity or vilify racial change, then proceeds to vilify it unironically. The correct response to this racist POS leftist cheering on demographic changes is to vilify them for being racist pieces of shit. To make these racist ideas as abhorrent to our society as white nationalism, not to pick up the racist stick too. So PSA Sitch was sure to remind us during this racist Matt Walsh moment that the left wing are the real racist. Anyway, let's watch this 3-minute clip.
You can either, when you look at the disappearance of white people, you can either celebrate diversity and a prosperous future, so that's the one, so you're celebrating it, or you can vilify racial change. Those are the two options. There's no other way of looking at it, according to The Hill and any other media report. And so there are really two parts of the story. The first is the story itself, which is the demographic trend, where whites are trending towards extinction in the United States.
By the way, those are not your only two options, right? Like, if you want, your position can be like, I don't care if he's black, I don't care if he's white, he's a person. If you want to be that person, that isn't going to make you lose your job. That isn't going to make you like get shunned by society. That's a position that many Americans hold. This idea that you're either going to be like, yay, black people, or you got to be like, boo, black people. Like, those are your only two options. You either got to be like on the like verge of like on your knees, like personally apologizing for what, you know, white people did to every black person you meet. Or you want to bring back those things that we did to black people, like right now times. You want to bring back those practices. I don't know why it has to be one of those crazy extremes. I mean, he's saying that those are the only takes you can have on it in our society. No, it isn't. If you want to say, man, like, who cares if someone's black or white? It doesn't matter. If that's your take on diversity, you're not going to get dragged through the mud for it. You're going to be fine. There might be like a few like internet sleuths that do, but you'll be fine in society. You can certainly talk about it. And hey, Matt Walsh at a decently sized media publication, Daily Wire, talking about white demographics in a very weird way, as this segment will continue to show, still has his job as far as I'm aware.
Like that's the way it's headed. And then the other part of the story is the veil of silence around this issue, the wall that is erected around it. And I know you're going to say, well, you just read a story about it, so there's not a silence. Yeah, they can report on it. So you report and you celebrate diversity, and then you just move on. We don't talk about it. We don't think much about it, and that's it. You aren't allowed to talk much about it. You certainly can't be concerned about it. You're not allowed to express any concern. That's unthinkable.
I think it's a stupid thing to be concerned about. I don't know if it's unthinkable. There are people who express concerns about it. Like, I guess when he says unthinkable, he means bad. I do think it's not good to be concerned about there being more black people in the neighborhood. Yes.
To hear that whites are on their way to minority status and the white population is declining, the worst thing you could possibly do is To talk about it at all is already a problem. But
you're talking about it right now, and you were saying, and like, who you can talk about it. I don't know. I feel like some people pretend that certain topics you're just not allowed to talk about. You're allowed to talk about white demographics or the demographics in this country changing, right? It's just that certain things that if you said, well, having that conversation could get you in a lot of hot water. Saying things like, I don't care if they're black or white, that's not going to get you in a lot of hot water. If you said something like, hey, black people shouldn't move to America, or I don't like immigrants, stop all the immigrants from moving to America to keep America white. Yeah, that's going to produce pretty negative outcome because it's horribly racist. And like fighting and putting regulations in place to maintain the hegemony of a certain race is a stupid thing for a government to restrict its economy to do, restrict its ability to have more high-skilled laborers come to the country, scientists, or even like low-skill, quote-unquote low-skill. I mean, that's the terminology for it, though. Low-skill laborers to come to the country. You're going to restrict it not based off of real economic concerns or the concerns for the wages for local workers, but out of what, a concern that they're the wrong color shade? Yeah, it's unbelievably silly.
But to suggest that there's any reason at all to be concerned about that, or to be anything less than thrilled by that development.
Yeah, it's called unskilled labor, not low skill, sorry.
Is incredibly racist, we're told. So all you can do, I saw some liberty.
Yeah, it is pretty racist to be like, oh God, there's more black people in the neighborhood. A lot less white people here. It's pretty scary. I'm very concerned. Yeah, I do think that's racist. That's like that's the easiest thing to answer in my life. That's racist.
Of course, reacting to this on Twitter just now, and this news from the Hill, and saying, "Oh, this is great. I don't see any problem with this. Who could possibly have a problem with it? Who cares if whites are going extinct in America? What difference does it make? I'm a libertarian."
What does he mean going extinct? White people make up the majority of the country right now. When he says going extinct, does he mean like going under 50%? Going under 50% isn't going extinct. Like even when we go under 50%, the majority of the country is going to be like black people. It's going to be a culmination of different races and people from different backgrounds. It isn't like, oh, the black faction is taken over or anything like that. In fact, if we are headed towards extinction, the black population actually as a percentage is lowering too. I think it's supposed to go from like 13% to 12% in the next few years. Would we say that black people are heading towards extinction? I mean, that's a lower rate than white people overall in the country, and that's a small decline. Like when I don't know, it's like he's advertising the imminent collapse of the white race, but there's going to be white people in the United States well after Matt Walsh is dead and I'm dead. We're nowhere near extinction. White people are not on the endangered species list, I'll tell you that.
I don't understand anything. That's the only attitude you're allowed to have. But
also, let me say, eventually, I think there's a very good chance that there would be so much reproduction between races and peoples that what we now define as white people, which is a definition that has changed through time. Italians didn't used to be white. Now they're white. Other groups in Europe that are now traditionally considered to be white were not considered white. Like maybe the definition of whiteness will expand, or maybe it will stay the same and white people will decline and we've got a future where we're all just like different shades of like brown, either light tan to darker tan. Why should I be scared of that outcome? Like legitimately, why should I be scared of that outcome? Why is that a outcome I should be terrified by? Maybe this is because I grew up in a community that was, that had black people in schools that I went to. In fact, the majority of my classes were black. I think for the school that I went to, it was black. then I believe it was Latino, then it was I think white people. There were not a lot of white people. There were only 2 white people in my class, including myself, and the other one I found out I was related to my senior year. So maybe that's had an impact on me. But that type of, I don't think there's a negative impact, by the way. But I don't think that me having a child with a black person is a negative outcome. I don't understand what's the bad part here that we need to like prevent something from happening.
Here's what we know also. We know that it doesn't even need to be said, but I'll say it anyway, because we all know that's true. But we know that the continued existence of any other race of people is considered deeply important. And the preservation of the historical and traditional racial identity of any nation is considered deeply important. You know,
I really don't think it's that important. I don't think it's important that black people stay the same shade. I don't think it's important that white people stay the same shade. I don't think it's important that anyone stays a certain shade or their descendants stay a certain shade. I just don't think that's the case. I don't think it has an impact on the GDP. I don't think it has an impact on like scientific development. Like the skin pigmentation does not. You know, development, education, resources like for like very young children, like daycare. These are the things that are going to have an impact on how well you perform and how well your society does. It's not going to be your skin pigmentation. Unless you create a social issue out of it and social divides through it. And therefore like start treating it like a 2-tiered class system and give them worse conditions, which are going to then lead to worse outcomes, which is what happened in the United States.
because no, it's very important that we have all varieties of hummingbirds. Every variety is very, very important. We have to keep them all around. Every animal in the animal kingdom, we got to keep them all around. It's extremely important. If any particular variety starts to dwindle, if any particular type of species of animal gets driven out of its territory, it's a very bad thing. So it's interesting that we can see this with hummingbirds, but not with certain kinds of people. Well, in particular, one kind of person, which would be a white person.
Okay, if we're gonna take this analogy to its conclusion, and I'm not trying to like guilt, like, oh my God, what evil white people, but we're not natives, like as in the people who, you know, are the people, you know, the historical descendants of this land, like 1,000, 2,000 years ago. They could, that's not us. We came in the last hundreds of years. Now we've been here long enough that we've made our mark. We've contributed in ways to development and like and ideas, stuff like that. But if we're using the hummingbird example, are we the invasive species that came to North America, annihilated the local population, and then took over? Are we the invasive species? Okay, putting that aside, I don't think that we should care that much if one hummingbird is mating with another type of hummingbird, like the orange hummingbirds are mating with the red hummingbirds, and then they're creating a combination of orange and red hummingbirds. I don't think that matters. I don't think that matters at all. And I would feel very silly if I had some scientist come into my office and say, we need to stop the orange and red hummingbirds from mating, or we need to stop the migratory patterns of the orange birds because it could lead to more orange birds down the line in the hummingbird community. We need to divert resources to... No, that's not what they would do. No, it would be, you'd be laughed out of the room for saying something like that. Now, if it was a scenario where this type of hummingbird is annihilating and murdering all of the other type of hummingbird, then yeah, I think it's because it's come and it seeks the destruction of it, then yeah, I think that's a little bit different. I think that's significantly different. But I don't think no one, and scientists included, would be that particularly miffed to hear that the orange and red hummingbirds are mating more and that the population of just the orange hummingbirds are going down, and we're seeing a big increase in the combination of blue and orange hummingbirds or red and orange hummingbirds. And that's another thing that people talk about. It's not that, you know, we just have tons and tons of people from like Central Africa coming to the United States and making the population just like more diverse that way. A lot of it is we have couples, like a black person and a white person, having a child in this mixed race. And what is that child going to be classified as? Not white. It's going to be classified as a black child. And because that's how we classify it, that's considered an increase in the amount of black people in the country. That's not considered an increase in the amount of white people in the country for a lot of the people who do this data. I know some of the data that has been tallied on this, they include like a separate category, but this is not something that the government or really I think anyone should concern themselves with, the color pigmentation of people's skin in a society. It would be as silly if scientists ran around saying, I'm scared, blue hummingbirds, there's too many blue hummingbirds. That would be very silly. Anyway, let's move on to another example of Matt Walsh talking about this issue that was recently brought to the attention of the serfs, and they reposted it. Let's watch it. Matt Walsh claims a culture difference led to the Civil War. He does multiple variations of the 14 words and says that the Civil War will happen. I don't know if he does different variations of the 14 words. I don't remember that from the audio that I heard, but we'll re-listen in a second. And says the Civil War will happen again unless something is done. When he gets pushed back, you keep bringing this up and you make it seem like I'm making some racist point. Let's listen.
On what's important to you, what your values are and all that, that country cannot exist for very long. And that's where civil wars come from. That's why we fought the Civil War to begin with, was because there was a cultural difference between the North and the South, and we're going to be heading that way again.
That's a very weird summation of the Civil War, is a cultural difference. Like, the reason the Civil War happened wasn't because all of a sudden all these Southerners were like, you know what? I just don't feel like I'm American. There was political reasons around slavery and economics. I don't want to get too into the depths of why the Civil War happened, but I think you'd have to chalk up a lot of things to cultural differences, right? Including the entirety of the institution of slavery for you to make this conclusion. But yeah, no, I think this is a little reductive, whatever.
Again, if we don't say, okay, this is who we are, and by the way, the people saying this is who we are need to be plentiful and strong.
I agree.
And potent.
I just personally feel that you don't have to be an Anglo-Saxon to continue that line of thought. I just think people need to be more patriotic about the country in which they live, know more about its heritage and where it came from and how it sprang about. I mean, I married somebody that's, I don't think Maria's Anglo-Saxon, and she definitely has left her culture at the door. So, I mean, if Maria and I have 5 kids, like now I'm confused. Am I perpetuating the problem or
no, see, you keep bringing this up and it makes me look like I'm making some racist point. I know you're saying that's what you're trying to do, but that's obviously not what I'm saying. Have relations and kids with whoever you fall in love with. That's great. As long as they're the same gender. I'm fine with that. All I'm saying is that as a general rule, you know, for our culture and our identity to continue, we need to just procreate and keep that culture going. Because you say, well, come over here and have some patriotism and identify with us. Why should they identify with us when we don't identify with us? When it's not even important enough to us to procreate and continue our culture, why should they give a damn about it? They don't. I don't blame them. I mean, what exact philosophy and values have we shown that are so important to us?
But I mean, I think the point is that if you're patriotic Americans that love the country, that have ingrained themselves in this country for several generations, need to start promoting more generations of people.
But it's easy to say these vague things like, well, promote and do this and that. But it's the reality. If we actually want to talk about how to solve the problem, it's real simple, but it involves us all actually doing something, which, like I said a million times now, is frankly just having kids and passing that down to your kids.
I already said what I said in the last segment, so I don't want to, I mean, not the last segment, but the last video I was reacting to, so I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse. The only reason I'm showing this, and I'm even commenting on this audio, because I feel like I made my point solidly enough with the first audio, and there's more here if you wanted to go and listen to it. The rest of it's been posted by the serfs if you wanted to listen to the entirety of his statements. And I think he posted the original source down here if you wanted to make sure he wasn't taken out of context. But when it comes the reason I'm watching this is originally when I played the wrong one, didn't I? I did play the wrong one. I was confused because I didn't hear like certain audio cues I was waiting to respond to. This is the one I wanted to react to. Oopsie doopsie. Okay, let's try this again. This is the one I wanted to react to. It was the first one. New leaked audio of Matt Walsh arguing with his co-host about how you can separate race and culture and how Mexicans can never be Americans or white. He goes on to mock indigenous genocide and boast about the superiority of white culture in society.
So I'm confused by bringing the culture with them. If they,
Of course they're going to. Of course they're going to. That's what makes them Mexican. Of course they will.
that is not. I'm saying if they stop identifying themselves as just Mexicans and they start, appreciating the country that they currently reside.
What is the country? I mean,
America.
Well, then, but what does that mean? If you take away the Anglo-Saxon culture, which is what started this damn country.
Yeah, but you.
Not damn country.
You can adopt philosophies, is my point. So I'm confused by race or culture. Like, what are you promoting?
Both. You can't separate them. They're the same. What I'm saying is not like I'm making this up. This has just been.
That's the line that really kills me. Both race and culture, both. You cannot separate them. They're the same. That's racial essentialism. That is ethno-nationalism. This is no longer like, oh, well, he's talking about American culture. That right there is ethno-nationalism. Now, maybe Matt Walsh will say, no, that was a slip of the tongue. I'm not going to be that charitable. I try to be charitable in these conversations. I'm not going to be that charitable. But race and culture, they're inseparable. Unless you take somebody and you remove them from their culture, and you put them in another culture, they can be grown up in that culture. We've seen many instances of this around the world, of people being adopted from one country of a different race, black, maybe from Africa, or vice versa, taken over somewhere else, and then raised by a family of a different race, of a different culture, raised in that culture. It's happened before. I don't understand why it can't happen again. We've seen in the United States as people of many different races and creeds have come over to contribute to the American project. So I don't know why he's saying that it's inseparable. Because I, after going across to other countries in Ukraine, into Europe, and then coming back and seeing how Americans behave and Europeans behave, yeah, there is an American culture. And people of many races share it. I don't like this racial essentialism. This is when you're really getting to that like race realism bullshit. But you want to know why I really wanted to talk about this specific second clip? Because I think I already made my point with the first clip. I did an interview on my main channel with a right sector fighter. I don't know how many of you guys watched it. I hope you guys go check it out. It's a decent interview. I should actually be interviewing another right sector fighter tomorrow, actually. I'm going to be doing it by computer. In that interview with the right sector fighter, and this was an ideologically devout, I would say far right sector fighter, who's been fighting since 2014. I remember after the interview, because I wanted to just kind of peg type of ideology that these people have, their motivations on a both individual level and as a group. And I walked away from the conversation not saying that, oh, this guy is an extremist. I was like, God, this guy reminded me a lot of Matt Walsh when it came to the ideology behind the things he was saying. Not the things about like Russian imperialism or colonialism, but when it came to like social values. When it came to things like LGBT issues. And I couldn't shake it. I was like, God, why do these guys remind me so much of Matt Walsh? And this interaction right here is even more on point, is even more on the nose. Because if you go watch that right sector interview, he was talking about the Anglo-Saxon culture that they wanted to protect, and they wanted to adopt in Ukraine. And they didn't even talk about the Anglo-Saxon ethnicity. They just said Anglo-Saxon societies. So that means that Matt Walsh was more on the nose than I would say generally some of the most far-right people in the Ukrainian military. At least from my experience. Pretty wild. Pretty wild.